Throughout the long, turbulent march of human history, technology has always arrived as a promise. It is the fire stolen from the gods, the steam that broke the back of feudalism, the silicon that wove the world into a single shimmering network. We are taught that progress is a linear ascent, an unstoppable climb toward a brighter, more efficient future. But there is a darker chapter to this story, one written in the margins of classified dossiers and whispered in the hallways of high-security research labs. Sometimes a discovery promises something other than progress. It promises power without control. There are moments when a breakthrough doesn't just improve a system, it shatters the foundations of the world as we know it. It offers efficiency without limits, a capability so profound that the consequences become impossible to predict or manage. In those rare, terrifying instances, governments and military planners have reached a consensus that is rarely discussed in textbooks or on the evening news. They didn't just regulate the technology, they didn't just tax it or put it behind a paywall, they buried it. They realized that some secrets are too heavy for a fragile society to carry. They understood that once certain genies are let out of the bottle, there is no prayer, no law, and no force on earth that can force them back in. This is the story of the forbidden technologies, the breakthroughs that were deemed too dangerous for the light of day, and the silent war to ensure the public never even knew they existed. The mid-20th century was a golden age of unbridled scientific optimism. From the splitting of the atom to the mapping of the double helix, it seemed there was no mystery the human mind could not solve. But in the shadow of the Manhattan Project, a new kind of chill settled over the scientific community. It was a realization that the open science of the past was becoming a liability. Across the globe, from the secluded labs of Los Alamos to the closed cities of the Soviet Union, researchers began to hit a specific, disturbing wall. They were discovering paths in physics, biology, and computation that were advancing faster than human society could possibly absorb. The fear wasn't that the public wouldn't understand the science, it was that the public would understand it all too well. The classified silence. Suddenly, the papers stopped being published. The Nature and Science journals of the world began to see gaps where revolutionary research should have been. The canceled conferences. Brilliant minds who were scheduled to speak on breakthrough energy generation or advanced molecular synthesis simply didn't show up. Their names were quietly scrubbed from the rosters. The vanishing branches. Entire wings of universities and corporate R&D departments were reorganized or absorbed into the defense establishment. To the outside world, it looked like a project had failed. Officially, the research had hit a dead end, the funding had dried up, the math didn't work. Unofficially, the math worked perfectly. It worked so well that the results terrified the men in charge. They looked at the data and realized that if this knowledge were released into the civilian world, it would trigger a chain reaction that would dismantle the global economy, render current weapon systems obsolete, and strip the state of its power to maintain order. In that moment, the researchers went silent, and the information age became the age of the hidden. The ultimate nightmare for a government is not a weapon that requires a billion-dollar factory to build. It is a weapon or a technology that can be built in a garage. The danger of these forbidden technologies wasn't just their potential for military misuse, it was their accessibility. We often assume that the most dangerous secrets are the most complex, requiring vast infrastructures and rare materials. But the most terrifying breakthroughs in the mid-century archives were those that required relatively simple components. Discoveries in resonant frequency, high-energy plasma, or biological manipulation that utilized off-the-shelf parts or common industrial chemicals could be replicated outside control. Once the fundamental principle was known, there was no bottleneck, no uranium enrichment was needed, no massive supercomputers were required. It was purely a matter of knowing the how. Scaled dangerously fast. Technologies where the jump from a laboratory experiment to a world-altering event was a matter of weeks, not decades. In the wrong hands, these technologies didn't need a standing army or a national treasury to back them. They only needed curiosity. The planners reached an unavoidable conclusion. You cannot give a match to a child and tell them to only use it for light. If a discovery had the potential to provide unlimited free energy, but also had the side effect of being easily converted into a device that could level a city block, and if that device could be built with the parts of a radio, then the free energy was not worth the risk. The technology was deemed unacceptable. It was categorized as a civilization ender, not because of its intent, but because of its nature. And so the blueprints were moved into vaults that were never meant to be opened, and the scientists were reminded that their first duty was to the survival of the species, even if it meant denying the world a miracle. One of the most persistent whispers in the world of forbidden technology concerns the zero-point or cold fusion breakthroughs of the 1970s and 80s. The dream was simple: a way to tap into the fundamental energy of the vacuum or to create nuclear fusion at room temperature. It promised a world without fossil fuels, without scarcity, and without poverty. But to the intelligence agencies, unlimited energy was a synonym for unlimited destruction. If you create a device that can power a house for a century from a cup of water, you have also created a power source for a directed energy weapon of unimaginable scale. You have created a way to destabilize the global oil and gas markets overnight, leading to a total collapse of the financial systems that govern the planet. In that moment, the researchers went silent, and the information age became the age of the hidden. At the center of the Great Suppression was a specific, recurring breakthrough: high-density, compact energy systems. By the late 1960s, a handful of research teams, some at Lockheed, others in the back rooms of the Soviet Kurchatov Institute, had stumbled upon methods to extract massive amounts of power from incredibly small amounts of matter. These weren't the hulking, steaming nuclear reactors we know today. These were elegant, quiet systems capable of output levels never meant for civilian environments. They were portable power. Imagine a device no larger than a shipping container that could provide free, limitless electricity to an entire metropolitan area. On the surface, it sounds like the dawn of a golden age. No more oil wars, no more pollution, no more poverty driven by resource scarcity. But through the lens of national security, the picture was far darker. The regulation nightmare. If energy is free and portable, the state loses its primary lever of control. You cannot tax a sun in a box. You cannot regulate a society that doesn't need a grid. The invisible threat. These systems were difficult to detect. A device capable of powering a city is by definition a device capable of being converted into a weapon that could erase one. In the hands of a non-state actor, a compact power cell becomes a suitcase nuke with 1,000,000 times the efficiency. The stability paradox. If this technology had spread, it would have collapsed the global oil economy overnight. Centuries-old alliances would have shattered. The financial backbone of the West would have snapped. If it worked, it would revolutionize society. But if it failed, or if it were intentionally overloaded, it wouldn't just blow a fuse. It would erase city blocks in a flash of white heat. The planners looked at the fragile, polarized world of 1970 and decided that the risk was simply too high. Humanity was like a toddler that had just discovered a loaded gun. The only safe move was to take the gun away. By the early 1970s, the military planners and the men in black from the Department of Energy faced an impossible choice. They stood at a crossroads that would define the next century of human history. One path led to a world of absolute abundance, but it was a world where chaos was only one madman away. The other path led to the world we live in now, a world of managed stagnation, fossil fuels, and controlled growth. They chose the shadows. The suppression was carried out with a surgical, cold-blooded efficiency. This wasn't a conspiracy in the way Hollywood depicts it. It was a series of bureaucratic maneuvers designed to split the technology apart until it could no longer function. The fragmentation of knowledge. The core principles were locked behind compartmentalized classification. One team knew the physics, another knew the materials, a third knew the cooling. No one was allowed to see the whole picture. The seizure of IP. Under the Invention Secrecy Act of 1951, thousands of patents were quietly intercepted. Inventors were served with secrecy orders, which forbade them from discussing their own work with anyone, even their lawyers, under threat of imprisonment. The dismantling of prototypes. The physical machines, the shining coils, and the glowing tubes were dismantled piece by piece and moved to secure sites like Area 51 or the Sandia National Laboratories. The researchers themselves were the hardest components to manage. Men and women who had dedicated their lives to solving the energy crisis were suddenly reassigned to innocuous, dull projects. Some were moved to weather forecasting. Others were given quiet teaching positions at remote universities. Some, those who couldn't stay silent, simply vanished from the professional record, their names never appearing in another journal. Some never worked in the field of physics again, haunted by the knowledge of a miracle they were forced to bury. Every secret has its scars. Before the technology was fully suppressed, there were the glitches, the moments when the dangerous reality of this forbidden science briefly broke through the surface of our world. These weren't catastrophic disasters like Chernobyl or Hiroshima. They were quiet, localized anomalies that left no crater, only a chilling silence. The gray spikes. In 1968, a lab in the Midwest experienced a resonance event. For 3 minutes, every bird within 5 miles of the radius fell dead from the sky, and the soil beneath the facility became permanently sterile. There was no explosion, just a sudden invisible pulse of radiation that bypassed every sensor. The localized blackouts. On multiple occasions, early tests of compact reactors caused time dilation effects or localized blackouts that lasted for days, where electronics simply refused to function as if the laws of physics had been temporarily suspended. The unexplained failures. Expensive, high-tech equipment in nearby factories would suddenly fuse together into solid blocks of metal, or the air in the test chamber would turn to ozone so thick it burned the lungs of the researchers. These incidents never reached the newspapers. They were scrubbed by cleanup crews that arrived in unmarked vans, posing as utility workers or environmental inspectors. They removed the equipment, soil, and sometimes the witnesses. Each incident reinforced the same chilling conclusion among the high command. The public didn't need this. The world was too small, and our grasp of these forces was too primitive. We were children playing with the fundamental hardware of the universe. The decision to classify wasn't born out of a desire for power, but out of a genuine, bone-deep fear that one more accident wouldn't stay quiet. It wouldn't stay localized. It would be the accident that ended everything. For the last 50 years, we have lived in a vacuum. If you look at the rate of technological progress in the first half of the 20th century, the leap from the Wright brothers to the moon landing in just 66 years, and compare it to the last 50, there is a strange, inexplicable slowing. We have better screens, we have faster internet, but we are still burning dead plants for energy. We are still using the same basic rocket engines designed in the 1950s. This is the suppression gap. The forbidden technology has left a hole in our development. We have been channeled into safe technologies, digital systems that are easy to track, easy to tax, and easy to shut off. We are playing in a digital sandbox because the real-world miracles were deemed too dangerous to keep. Somewhere in a climate-controlled vault buried deep beneath the Nevada desert or the Russian tundra, the prototypes are still there.
They are waiting for a version of humanity that is no longer driven by fear, a version that can be trusted with a sun in a box. But until that day comes, the blueprints will remain behind lead-lined glass, and the greatest breakthroughs in human history will remain forbidden. The greatest misconception about the suppression of forbidden technology is the idea that it simply vanished into a void. In the clandestine world of high-level intelligence, nothing that functions is ever truly destroyed. Instead, the forbidden technology underwent a process of fragmentation. To prevent a civilization-altering breakthrough from reaching the public, the military-industrial complex acted as a prism, taking a single blinding beam of discovery and breaking it into a dozen dimmer, more manageable rays. The original, unified theory, the one that promised total energy independence or revolutionary propulsion, was dismantled. Its parts were scattered across 1,000 different black projects, ensuring that no single contractor, no single general, and certainly no single civilian could ever reconstruct the whole. Decades later, we see the echoes of these 1960s and 1970s breakthroughs resurfacing in our modern world, but they appear as shadows of their former selves. Advanced propulsion concepts. The rapid, silent movement of modern, unidentified aerospace platforms often relies on high-energy plasma actuators or electromagnetic air spike technology. These are the direct descendants of the forbidden experiments in gravity manipulation, but they are utilized only in the most classified theaters of war, controlled, limited, and shrouded in deniability. Experimental energy storage. While the public struggles with the incremental gains of lithium-ion batteries, deep inside specialized aerospace facilities, solid-state and zero-point storage concepts are used to power high-end Durance drones. These are the safe offshoots of the original portable power cells, neutered versions that can power a surveillance craft but aren't allowed to power a city. Classified aerospace systems. The material science that emerged from the forbidden labs, metals that don't heat, ceramics that absorb radar with 99% efficiency, now coats the skin of the B-21 Raider. We are given the coat of paint, but the fundamental physics of the engine remain locked in a vault. The original idea, the primary discovery, remains behind a curtain of lead and law. We are allowed to have the crumbs of the feast, but the recipe is considered a matter of planetary security. This fragmentation ensures that even if a modern scientist rediscovers a piece of the puzzle, they will find themselves hitting a wall of existing classified patents that they are not allowed to see, let alone challenge. We often like to believe that time heals all secrets, that eventually everything is declassified. But today, more than half a century after the first silent researchers were reassigned, some of the original documents from the Forbidden Era remain under a total knowledge suppression order. The reason isn't that the math is outdated or that the technology has been surpassed by modern computers. On the contrary, the reason is that the risk hasn't changed. The fundamental barrier to the release of this technology has always been the misuse-to-access ratio. In the 1970s, the planners realized that as our manufacturing technology improved, the danger of forbidden knowledge actually increased. The garage factor. In 1965, you needed a state-funded lab to build a resonant frequency generator. Today, you can 3D print high-precision components and order specialized superconductors on the dark web. The barrier to entry has collapsed, but human nature has remained exactly the same. The unstoppable chain reaction. Some of these energy technologies aren't just batteries, they are potential cascades. If a device taps into the vacuum energy of space and the safety fails, there is a theoretical risk that it could create a localized tear in the fabric of space-time, or a thermal runaway that cannot be extinguished by conventional means. Planetary fragility. In a world of 8 billion people, where social media can mobilize millions in seconds, the release of a technology that destroys the global economy would lead to a collapse of order that no government could manage. The potential damage is still too high. We are a species that still fights over borders drawn in the sand. We are not a species that can be trusted with a power source that makes borders irrelevant. Some knowledge, once released, becomes a force of nature, unstoppable, uncurable, and unforgiving. The guardians of these secrets believe that the public's right to know is secondary to the public's right to exist. History is usually a record of what we did, the wars we fought, the towers we built, the frontiers we crossed. But this story is a record of what we didn't do. It is a chronicle of restraint. In a rare, terrifying moment during the height of the Cold War, a small group of humans, scientists, generals, and statesmen looked into the abyss of their own ingenuity and blinked. They saw a future where they had won the battle against scarcity, but lost the battle against themselves. They realized that their inventions outpaced their wisdom. They drew a line in the bedrock of history and said, "Not yet." It wasn't an act of malice or a conspiracy of greedy oil men, though greed certainly played its part in the shadows. At its core, it was a moment of profound, terrifying sobriety. It was an admission that we are a Type 0 civilization trying to play with Type 1 tools. Maybe one day society will be ready. Maybe one day we will develop a global governance, an ethical framework, or a level of collective maturity that allows us to handle unlimited power without using it to erase each other. We wait for the day when our wisdom finally catches up to our math. But until that day comes, deep in the climate-controlled silence of classified archives, beneath the surveillance of black site guards and the weight of national security laws, a technology remains hidden. It sits in the dark, humming with a potential that could save the world or end it. It remains there not because it failed, but because it worked too well. It is the miracle we were forced to forget. The forbidden fire that we were told to put out lest it consume the very world it was meant to illuminate.